And we are live. What is going on with everybody? It is your boy Eric, aka Young God, coming to you live in the Green Dungeon, giving it to you real raw rugged. If you look at me, I'm a little tired, but I had to wake up for this interview because I was really anticipating this. So I'm gonna let the person on the other line introduce himself, man. Who do we have here?
I'm Chris Van Vliet, and if you watch wrestling interviews on YouTube, there's a chance that you might have seen one of mine. So, Eric, thanks for having me on.
Of course, it's not a chance, man. They definitely have seen you. Like, I don't know how they can't see you. Like, I could be looking at something non-wrestling related, and you'll pop up. I don't know how. Like, I'd be looking at like a interview with a porn star, and they'd be like, "Also, you should watch this Chris Van Vliet interview." I'm like, "What the? What this guy doing anything?" So they get to interview Darby Allin. I'm looking at a Lisa Ann interview. Like, what's going on? So yeah, you are all over the place, man. So let me start by that. How exactly? Because I'm pretty sure you use YouTube like we all do. There are certain videos that get recommended more than others. How
Yeah.
exactly did you get in that algorithm? Because I
Oh
think you
God,
have gotten that algorithm.
I wish I knew. I think that the YouTube algorithm is this crazy mystery that none of us really know the answer to. I would have to think, with your example there, the reason I'm coming up when you're watching interviews with porn stars is because you've watched my stuff before. So I think that you know. I'm imagining that the more interviews I'm doing, the higher that they're ranking. I guess if you watch anything related to WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan, whatever, I'm guessing that at some point along the line, one of my interviews, I think I'm like 320 interviews or something. So there's a lot to choose from there, like big cross section. But man, if I knew how that algorithm worked, be living in a much larger house, I think.
That's funny. It's funny because you've definitely had a career before you got into like known to be like the wrestler interviewer doing other things. But do you feel like this wrestling thing has made you like more known than ever?
Oh yeah, it's been crazy because like we live in a world now where it's like so hyper niche. Like I've been on TV for 15 years. It's been amazing. It was a dream come true for me to work in television, host a TV show. I'm from Toronto. I've worked in Vancouver, Cleveland. Now I'm in Miami hosting an amazing show called Deco Drive, where I basically travel around the world interviewing movie stars, reviewing movies, and talking about like cool adventures you can do here in South Florida. It's so crazy that like I shoot these interviews on my phone, often alone.
Mm.
You kind of do it in this vacuum of like it's you and one other person, and that's it. You're in an empty room, and it's crazy to think that this is like going out there to hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people. But back to the original point here, it's the internet's so super niche that like if you're on TV, that's great. A wide, broad audience sees you. When you do something like with wrestling, like you are dialing into a very
Yeah.
specific subsection of an audience. And like I went to the Fight for the Fallen show in Jacksonville, and like seeing how many people not only recognize me, but like could tell me specific things that happened in my interviews. Like that's insane to me.
Yeah, it's crazy because I always say this like probably earlier this year, I had a video go viral, and that video definitely it's weird because sometimes you would just go to Walmart just thinking you're gonna go get something, and then somebody notice you, and you're like that's just so crazy because however long ago you would have never thought of that. So have you adjusted to people like recognizing you, or are you still kind of new to it?
It's being on local television for as long as I have. You get people that go, "Oh, you're the guy from the news," but now it's like people being like, "Hey, Chris Van Vliet," and I will completely understand that my last name is not easy to pronounce.
Yeah.
So the fact that people like can pronounce my name is like, oh man, I just want to give you a high five for that, like alone. And I'm also now getting, because of the interview I did with MJF, MJF referred to me as Chris Van Vliet. So now I get called that a lot by people, and it's like, I get where you're coming from. I'm in on the joke with you. That's totally cool.
No, I understand that. I know that could definitely be annoying because like I hate people like that. Like I'll definitely like say something, or let's say if I'm doing an interview, I'm doing something with somebody else, and they say something, somebody not in on the joke. I feel like you can't say the joke. Like if you're in, like if MJF says it, you can say it. But if like some random dude from Wisconsin sees you, like, oh, Fridge Grant, it's like, hey, shut up. You live in Wisconsin. Like, don't say that. So
Right.
like, I know that could be annoying, and it's like, it's interesting because speaking of being annoying, you're from Canada, and you guys are really nice. That's not annoying at all. You guys are really nice. And I was really curious, like, how did you adjust moving from Canada to Florida? Because I grew up in Florida all my life, and I'm just curious, like, what do you see the differences or the similarities between the people?
Well, it was Canada to Ohio first for 5 years. Now I've been here in Florida for almost 5 years. So I had a transition into like my first, I guess, time living in the States was in Ohio, and then now living here in Florida. I mean, it's vastly different
Yeah.
from Canada, but also very similar in a lot of ways. Um, I was so keyed in on accents when I first moved here, because like nobody thinks they have an accent, no matter where you're from. You could be from Alabama, you could be from the Bronx, and you don't think you have an accent. So when I first moved to Ohio, and I was like hearing all these different accents, that was so strange. And I was trying to like assimilate, try to get rid of the Canadian accent that I had. But the thing that I loved about moving to the U.S. was the food options. Like that was insane. Like the amount of chain restaurants that exist in the United States of America is like there's you guys are so lucky. You're so lucky to have like Cheesecake Factory and Texas Roadhouse and Applebee's and Golden Corral and then of course all the great local restaurants.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And when I first moved to 2010, when I first moved to Cleveland, I like gained 10 pounds in like the first 6 months because I was just eating like crazy, like eating all kinds of like, whatever I could get my hands on. But I really love it. Like the opportunities here don't really exist. Like without sounding cliche, like it's, you can truly live the American dream here. And especially now, I mean, you and I are proof of that. If you have an iPhone and then a YouTube channel, things can completely change your life.
It's really funny that you bring up accents because I was legitimately going to ask you, have you heard any Florida accents that you couldn't decipher? Because I've grown up from Florida all my life, and there are certain things I still cannot pick up what people are saying.
Well, the funny thing is, I live in South Florida, so it's a lot of a lot of Cubans here, a lot of Spanish people speaking people. So that's obviously a completely different accent. When you speak about American accents, the further north you go in Florida, it's like the further south.
Yeah.
Really, it's like that old phrase, you got to go north to go south in Florida. And I was in Daytona a couple weeks ago for Fighter Fest, Jacksonville this last weekend for Fight for the Fallen, and it's like it's as if you're in Georgia or somewhere like that. Like it's a very different lifestyle there.
See, I literally felt like you going from Canada to Florida because in middle school I went to this art school where everybody was like artsy and I'm gonna put on a ballet dress and it was like all artsy and stuff. And then I went to this school called First Coast for high school, and it was like going from Canada to Florida because that was a primarily black school, and a lot of their accents, it was crazy because it's mixed with like Haitian, it's mixed with like just all type of stuff. And somebody said it best to me. They said a lot of people from Florida do not really care. Like English isn't like so heavily accented. Like nobody really cares about English like that. It's like if it's pronounced right, it's pronounced right. If it isn't, it isn't. But if you go to most places, it's like we are very accented and enunciated. But Florida is like they might slur the words, and you're just like So yeah, it's definitely different. Do you feel the culture is different from Canada as well?
Yeah, for sure. Like American culture is different from, I guess, any other country. I would say it's most similar to Canada, but there's a lot of the politics here are different. A lot of the like things, like in Canada, like smoking weed became a thing before it was became legalized there. Before like in here, it's like still criminalized in some states. I think that Canada is just a little bit more open to those things. I was blown away when I had to go to the doctor for the first time, and like it costs hundreds of dollars. Like that doesn't happen in Canada. In Canada, like you break your arm, you just go in, they fix it, you leave.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. See you later. It's funny now when my parents come to visit, and this is the thing, when you live in Florida, all your friends want to come visit, especially in the winter time because, it's minus 20 and there's 4 feet of snow.
Yeah.
So when my parents come down, I'll say like phrases that I don't even realize are American now. Like I'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to take out the trash." My dad will be like, "Do you mean take out the garbage?" I'm like, "Sure, Dad." I'm like, "Oh man, there's traffic over there. You're going to want to take a different route." He's like, "You mean take a different route?" I'm like, "Wow, okay, sure, yeah." So there's little things like that.
It's crazy because I would have never realized that take out the trash was an American thing. I thought that was like a universal saying that everybody said.
I don't know. Maybe that's just my dad being funny, but trash and garbage, I guess. At least to him, they're different.
Well, is there anything that like you just refuse to let go of that's like a Canadian root of yours? Because you say you've assimilated to saying saying certain phrases, but there are certain things you're just like, I'm too Canadian not to do or say this.
I mean, I still like hockey a lot,
Mm.
and as you know, growing up in Florida, like nobody really watches hockey down here. So that's certainly still one thing. I will admit I don't watch it nearly as much as my friends back home, but that's one thing that I'll hang on to. I played hockey from age 6 to I still play hockey, so that's one thing. But when I first moved to Cleveland, that was my first real. I was 26 at the time. That was my first real jump into a big market and into the United States. I didn't want to be the guy who kept reminding people I was from Canada. I wanted to assimilate as much as I could and have people either like me or dislike me based on what they saw on television.
Yeah.
Not based on, oh, he's from Canada, he's talking about it all the time, or he sounds different or whatever. I just wanted to be me, and if people liked it, great. If people didn't like it, well, they're welcome to that as well.
That's funny you bring up hockey because I watched the Stanley Cup. I watched the Stanley Cup this year for the first time, and I think I might start watching hockey. Like I've never sat down and watched hockey, but I was like, yo, this is like football on ice mixed with like just like pure, just like they don't care. I was like, are they fighting? It's allowed? They just took off his gloves and hit him? Like, what's going on? I mean, he's white. He's crazy.
I think hockey might surpass baseball in terms of popularity in the
Definitely.
next 5 or 10 or 15 years because we see the numbers on baseball declining, which sucks because I grew up playing baseball more than any other sport. But baseball is, it's not really built for this generation for whatever reason. Like people find it boring and they don't really understand it. So I could see hockey. I could see hockey taking over, perhaps.
I feel like baseball is so slow paced, and like even when something mildly violent happens, people lose their mind. Like, oh my gosh, he got a hit in the wrist with a baseball. Oh my gosh! So compared to hockey, where you're just getting rammed against the wall and people are fighting, and it's just all type of crazy stuff. So yeah,
Well, think about it. If you get into a fight in any other major sport, basketball, baseball, football, soccer, you're suspended for several games and you're fined large sums of money.
yeah,
You get into a fight in hockey, you sit in a box for 5 minutes.
that's crazy. That's crazy.
It's such a different sport.
Do you have a team?
Well, obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs is my
Okay.
hockey team. I mean, I'm all Toronto teams. Obviously, I don't have an NHL team. So when it comes to, or NFL team, when it comes to football, I'm a Browns fan because I lived there for 5 years. And the Browns are going to be real good this year.
It's funny you say that because I don't think you are. But
There's no question.
you think so? I think it's one of those things. You know how in sports there's like a dream team assimilated, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be the one, and they don't live up to the hype. I think that might be the Browns.
Well, look, if the Cleveland Browns win more than 8 games,
That is a
it'll be
fact.
their best season in 12 years. So,
That is a fact.
look, they had a season with 0 wins. They had a season with 1 win. A lot of seasons with 3 and 4 wins. So last year was great, and Baker Mayfield didn't even start the first 3 games, and they still won. What, it was 6, 7 games. So I think that even winning 8 or 9 games, even if they don't make the playoffs, it's like, okay, guys, we got some progress.
No, it's funny. At least you root for a team you like have lived in the city in, because people hate me because I'm not a Jaguar fan at all. I've never been a Jaguar fan. I've always been a Patriot fan. So yeah, I get like heckled.
Tony Khan.
Yeah, I feel like an '80s heel. Like I just walk certain places, people throw like batteries and ice, and be like, "Boo, not a Jaguar fan." So yeah, it's kind of rough. But I mean, you're Canadian, so I'm pretty sure you're happy about the Raptors winning. That was pretty sure that was a big deal for
Of
everybody.
course. Yeah, that was the first major championship in Toronto since 1993. And I
Yeah.
remember, that was the Blue Jays. Joe Carter hit that game-winning home run in 93. It was back-to-back World Series wins for them. So, it's been a drought for 25-plus years in Toronto. And the fans there are so dedicated and so hardcore. And, man, they deserve this. And now I think that all fellow Torontonians are hoping it's the Leafs, because the Leafs are way up here in popularity.
Mhm.
Jays and the Raptors are good, but the Leafs are the pinnacle. So if
Yeah.
the Leafs ever win, I think the city might burn down.
No, that's crazy. Yeah, like I said, I definitely got to get into baseball. I mean, not baseball, but hockey way more than I am. But yeah, I forgot to mention this at the beginning because you were talking about Fight for the Fallen, and I went. Now, it was a really good show. I really enjoyed myself. But there was one thing that I didn't understand, and maybe you can help me understand this. why exactly didn't they like feed the stream of the video on the like kind of the big screen?
Yeah, so I've been to all of the AEW shows ever, all three of
Okay.
them, and I think it's for when they take the wide shots of the ring. I think it's actually a television production thing here.
Mm.
Without getting too technical, basically, if you're shooting the ring and the picture that you're shooting is on the screen behind it, there's a slight delay. Then it turns into this kind of like Inception world where it's a screen
Mm.
of a screen of a screen of a screen of a screen.
Okay.
That's why they kept the logo up there.
Okay, because I'm pretty sure you heard every time it went off, you're like
Yeah.
boo.
Yeah,
So
we
yeah.
can't see. We can't
Yeah.
see. Yeah, but yeah, and the WWE does this frequently as well. I mean, I was at WrestleMania, and it was on the big. I've been to WrestleMania like the last 9 years,
Mhm.
but it's on the big screen for most of it. But as soon as they're about to take a wide shot of the arena,
Yeah.
and they don't want that picture-in-picture thing, they will cut to like a WWE logo or a WrestleMania logo, and the crowd will just erupt in boos for like those 12 seconds,
Yeah.
and then it'll go back to normal. But so that's the reason, without getting too technical.
So being a TV guy and being like knowing a little technical things about it, watching AEW like a new startup program who's gonna like they make their mistakes and they're not gonna know certain things. Do you find yourself critiquing it sometimes
Oh yeah,
from a technical aspect?
of course, and it's
Mm.
not just AEW; it's anything I watch. I think it's hard for me to watch any TV show now or a movie without looking at it and going, "Why'd they do that?"
Yeah.
And I think the answer with a lot of times is like that's just a mistake. And AEW's only had 3 shows. Like, yeah, there's still going to be some technical errors. I mean, there's still technical errors on Raw and SmackDown, but there's just little things like at Double or Nothing. Like Bret Hart was clearly not told when to hold the belt up and which camera to hold it up to, and like that just kind of sucked because that was a really big moment of the night, like him revealing the championship, and he just kind of held it up, and the camera wasn't ready, and there was like the stuff was going on in the back with MJF or in the crowd with MJF, and just like little things like that. Or like there was a moment in the Battle Royal where Jimmy Havoc staple gunned the cigarette
Yeah.
to Joey Janela's head, and we only caught like a half-second shot of it. That should have been a really big moment in the match. And it's just, it's little things. It's planning and production, and there's going to be bumps in the road. I mean, if we watched the first episode of Raw, we'd be going, oh my God, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But it's made Raw what it is now, however many thousands of episodes later. And it's going to be the same thing, I always say in television, if you're not looking back, and this goes for YouTube, this goes for podcasts, if you're not looking back at the stuff that you made 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, with disgust going, oh my God, I've come so far.
Yeah.
And you're doing something wrong.
Outside of wrestling, do you watch certain things? Like, what is the thing that you watch, a TV show, movie, or whatever, that is like a common thing that you notice a mistake, like common mistakes made in TV shows or movies that give you like a gripe?
I think that in movies, it's the little things like where if someone's like drinking from a glass of water and it's half full, and then they cut away and then come back, and then the glass is like completely full. It's like, come on. There's an entire department on movie sets that is supposed to take care of that.
Mm.
Continuity. So it's just little things like that like I'll be like, oh, come on. Or like, that their hair is one way and then the shot changes and their hair is a
The other
different
way,
way.
yeah.
Like, I get that when you're on a movie set, you got to work fast and time is money, but there's just little things like that you don't see as much on the big budget films, but when you're looking at a smaller film, it's like, come on, you guys can fix that.
I remember this girl showing me this movie. It was a French movie, and she was like, "Just notice how everything is so different from American movies." I forget the name of it. It was like something blue. I forget what it was. And the interesting thing about it was they did things more different from American movies. Like they actually ate the food, they actually drunk the water and things like that. So why in American films do they not actually like I guess like eat and drink the stuff?
Well, I think it depends on the production. Like, I think some directors will tell you to, but the simple answer, and I've only been on a couple of movies, but I think the simple answer is if you and I are having this scene right now and we're eating pizza,
Yeah.
and we're going to shoot that same scene 7-10 times from different angles, now that continuity that we're talking about has to be completely on point every single time. So if you've taken 3 bites of your pizza when you're saying that line, and I've taken 2 bites of my pizza slice when I'm saying this line, every single time we do that scene, not only are we focused on what we're saying, being in that moment, and what are we doing with our face and our hands and everything. Now we also have to count how many bites we're taking.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why. Also, then they're going to have the I guess it'd be the craft services department or the art department bring in like however many pizzas. Always have them looking exactly the same. That's probably the answer.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, yeah, like making content is really difficult. I feel like people don't understand that. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's a really hard thing to do. It's not just I'm gonna shoot it and I'm done. Like, it's
Yeah,
pretty
I think
difficult.
that I'll even pick up my phone. I think a lot of people think YouTube is, what's going on, guys? Here we are. We're hanging out today. This is what's going on. Blah blah blah. And that's not really what it's all about.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that anyone can take away from this is that YouTube is not really about you. YouTube is about the people you're making the videos for. And if you're doing something that's really interesting, that's great. That's probably really interesting to you. But you got to make it bring value to people that are watching this. If you have a really exciting day that you did something cool, frame your video in a way that someone who's looking for your video or stumble across it through that algorithm you're talking about could find some value in it.
It's interesting you bring up like critiquing movies and things like that because I hate it, but now that I'm doing interviews, I find myself critiquing like journalists and people doing interviews because I was watching this interview last night and this guy took like 30 pauses and it was really awkward. Like he was like, oh, so that's what happened? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is really weird. So like, do you also find yourself critiquing journalists and people that do interviews?
Yeah, of course. And I think the biggest problem with this, people think of them as interviews. They're just conversations between two people.
I'm glad you. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm glad you. I really, really enjoy people who don't look at their interviews as interviews and just like a conversation. Like that's how it should feel. It should feel natural.
And through that, you end up getting these little nuggets of knowledge or little nuggets of news. And I think that's I have topics that I want to cover, as I'm sure you do too. I have topics that I want to cover, but I'm not going in that match.
Yeah.
You had that fight for the. I'm not doing that because it's not authentic. So I kind of think of it as like if I ran into you at a party, or if I ran into you at the grocery store and we were having a conversation, it would sound like this. It wouldn't sound like question answer.
Yeah. That's really like probably like my biggest pet peeve. Like somebody says something really crazy in an interview, and the journalists just go right past it. Like you can be interviewing Kenny Omega, he was like, "Yeah, I made out with Vince McMahon last night." You'd be like, "Oh, okay." Anyway, so back to my script, and it's like, "Well, you have to ask him about that." Like you made out, you know what I'm saying? That's crazy. You definitely have to like ask people about the things that they say as you would in a regular conversation.
Well, the biggest problem is a lot of people just aren't present, both in the content that they're creating and in real life in general. I think that too many people they ask a question, then they're already formulating what the next question or next topic is in the brain, that they're not really paying attention to what's going on here. They might still be nodding their head, but they're not really paying attention. They're just trying to get to what that next question is. And I've been super fortunate that my interviews have been, pretty long form. Like my interviews now are 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 minutes. So you have the chance that like, oh my God, I wish I had asked this earlier. I can now bring that up. I can go, I meant to bring this up earlier when you mentioned blah, 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 but here it is.
Now
when you're in a short interview, like I'm interviewing some of the stars of The Lion King this morning for my TV job. It's a short interview. It's like 4 or 5 minutes. So it really is like getting to the root of this. Like, there's no small talk there.
Those are the hardest because you might want to ask something, but you can't because you're so time constrained.
Oh yeah, and like if someone like goes into this great story, you can't really get into the the grit of that story because you're like, but I need to ask this other question. Like, stop wasting my time with this awesome story.
No, I would agree. Yeah, that's crazy. And before you actually get to those interviews, before I let you go, I definitely have to let the people know why I'm jealous of you. Because you have, I don't know how, well, because you built up a resume and things, but you have access to WWE wrestlers, which is really hard to try to get interviews with them because you have to go through WWE and this and that. So how exactly did that start from you having a resume? Like, because they just don't let anybody do interviews with everybody,
Yeah, WWE's like by far the hardest organization to get interviews with, and I get it. They want to control the narrative, and that's completely understandable. They want to put out the message that they want to put out. So it started many years ago when I first started in television. WWE is all about promoting their live shows. They're all about promoting Raw, SmackDown. and any pay-per-views. So when I lived in Vancouver, when I lived in Toronto, and when I lived in Cleveland and now here, when WWE comes to town, they make the rounds on the radio station and the TV stations, basically saying, "Hey, Raw's in town, buy your tickets."
Yeah.
That's how it started, and it started with me doing these interviews that were 10-ish minutes. We would air 15, 20, 30 seconds on TV going, "Hey, Raw's in town, and we interviewed The Miz, and here's what he had to say."
Yeah.
And then the rest of the interview would end up getting, just not played anywhere. Like, it would be on the cutting room floor, to borrow a term from, film. And I was like, well, I asked some questions there that I really liked.
Yeah.
Like, as a fan, I asked some questions I want to know the answers to, so other fans probably care too. And that's when I started putting them on my YouTube channel. And it was an interview I did with The Miz in 2011. He was throwing out the first pitch of the Cleveland Indians game. I interviewed him for like 4 minutes. And it was right after CM Punk had dropped the pipe bomb. And I'm like, oh, this was an interesting interview. And I put it up on my YouTube channel, didn't think anything of it. And I guess some fans found it and ended up with some dirt sheets the next day. And I woke up and this interview had 6,000 views. And I'm like, oh my God, like my interviews were getting like 20 views. And like one was my mom. And then I woke up the day after that and had 36,000 views. And I'm like, oh wow, like I think we're onto something here. So I wasn't really at that point going out of my way to make these interviews happen. But if and when WWE came to town 2-3 times a year, I would do these interviews. I'd put them on my YouTube channel, and it very slowly started to kind of grow from there.
Something interesting that I've noticed is that you kind of interview the new crop of talent. You have like some legends that you interview, but like I guess like the main ones are like the newer crop of talent that's like this generation of wrestlers. Now I don't know if you're familiar with this guy named You Shoot. He does like these interviews and that guy. So he interviews kind of like the older crop of wrestlers. And I heard him talking about it one time. He said that a lot of them are like insane, like they're crazy people. So I was curious is that the same with newer wrestlers? I would imagine it's not. That they seem pretty sane.
I don't think so at all. And I think that, look, it's a completely different era of wrestling now. Like, those guys were, like, almost all across the board back then, wrestlers were leaving their matches and going to the bar. And, like, I'm not saying everyone did, but drugs and alcohol were certainly more of a thing back then. Now guys are leaving their matches and going and playing video games with their buddies. Like, it's a completely different era. The reason I interview the younger wrestlers is because they're more accessible. Like, I work indie shows. I have for the last 10 or 12 years as a ring announcer. I'm a fan. I go to these shows anyways. So if I see that a big name is going to be there or an interesting person, I'll just reach out to them. I'll send them a message on Twitter, or I'll try to email them and say, hey, here's what I have to offer. If that appeals to you, and I'm always framing like, here's what's in it for you.
Yeah.
And if that appeals to them, then we go from there.
Well, hey, man, I really enjoyed that time. I don't want to keep you too long. You got to do your interviews. Who are you also interviewing, by the way, for The Lion King?
I'm interviewing the voices of young Nala and young Simba.
Who is Simba? Is it Joe Rogan? I mean, not Joe Rogan, but Seth Rogen?
Simba, the adult Simba is Donald Glover.
Oh, so you're interviewing Donald Glover?
No, I'm interviewing the young version.
Oh, okay.
The first half of the movie till he grows up. And the Nala in the movie is Beyonce, so I'm interviewing the young version of that character.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you have to say before we get out of here, man?
I just want to say thank you. Like, I need people to realize that, like, I'm a fan. I'm a wrestling fan that, I'm fortunate to have a broadcasting background that's helped a lot, but I'm just a wrestling fan, and, I followed my passion and my interest, and if I can do it, seriously, anyone else can do it. That is the best and worst thing about the time that we live in. That anyone can have a YouTube channel. Anyone can have a podcast. There's too many people out there that are making excuses for why they can't.
Well, hey, man, I want to say I hope you keep putting out the great interviews. Hopefully one day I can get the finesse plug that you have to get these WWE interviews because they're really good. And, for everybody watching, until next time, I say what I mean what I say. Haters going to hate, players going to play. And you guys holler at your boy.